All right, it's that time again. So today I'm talking about Whirlwind Hoda. There was an interesting discussion recently about whether or not you are guaranteed to crit every hit after Whirlwind and then Hoda. So the theory is, initially it was, that Whirlwind spends 50, Hoda spends 70. You'll build up 100 at least, more like 120, and then Red Ring of Fur will spend that um, or count that up and then give you a guaranteed crit on your Hoda, every Hoda. So recently people actually started noticing that when you don't Whirlwind for a whole second, um, you actually don't spend all 50 at once. It's spent in increments, little ticks. So I went into the training room and measured when those ticks happen and ran some numbers for different scenarios. So the first scenario is what I think a lot of people are doing. If you have Whirlwind and a one-hander and you spin like half a rotation when you start Whirlwind, and then you go into Hoda, and then you spin another half rotation, and then you go into Hoda, that's going to spend one tick of Fury every time you Whirlwind, and I'm assuming you have 30% attack speed, so I've accounted for that in your Hoda time. It doesn't make Whirlwind spend faster, so that's constant. Um, Whirlwind Fury spent. These things are all different depending on whether you go for one tick, two ticks, you're using one-handers, two-handers, and there's sort of a debate as to which of these four options is best. Obviously, if you run with one-handers, you'll squeeze more Hodas into every minute because Whirlwind doesn't take as much time. If you spin for one tick instead of two ticks, you'll also get more Hodas in every minute. So theoretically, that would be more DPS. Well, if you go for two ticks instead of one tick, then you can actually proc Red Ring of Fur on every single Hoda. You'll also proc Banished Lord's Talisman more frequently, and the theory with that is you'll have fewer Hodas in a minute, but the majority of them will hit harder. So I've actually simulated that, and the conclusion that I reached is that the best combination is one-handers for two ticks. Forgot to adjust this title here. All right. It's just barely better one-handers for two ticks. So the least is going to be two-handers for one tick. The problem is you'll have like 67 Hodas in a minute with two-handers and one tick. You'll have 69 Hodas in a minute with one-handers and one tick. But you'll have how many crits? 33 crits with one-handers and one tick. Almost 33 crits with two-handers and one tick. You'll have one extra crit overpower in a one-hander, one tick configuration in 1 minute. You'll hit a total of two more times with one-handers in one tick and one tick. It's those extra, let's see, you get an extra half of a white hit, you get an extra half of a crit, and that's one extra crit OP with one-handers and one tick. So it's 6% more damage to use one-handers than two-handers. If you're only going to do one tick, that's half of a Whirlwind rotation. So my recommendation then is to use Furious Whirlwind for one skill point to proc bleeding on your opponents. People were using their two-handed sword to proc bleeding on their opponents, but if you spend one more point, you can actually apply bleeding with one-handers and increase your DPS by 6%. So it's going to cost you 1 skill point, but it's going to increase your DPS 6%. I think that's worth it. It's hard to come across any damage bonus equivalent to 6% for the cost of 1 skill point anywhere in the skill tree, except for like ranking up your core skill. So that's for the one-ticks. One-handers are going to be better than two-handers. As for two-ticks, if you go one entire rotation plus 10%, it'll tick a second time. It's going to take 0.38 seconds to do that instead of 0.19 seconds. The result is that, let's just compare the one-handed tests. Alright, so this is one-handed half rotation, and this is one-handed for a whole rotation plus 10%. We have 69 total HOTAs in the one-handed one-tick configuration. With the one-handed two-tick configuration, we only have 57 HOTAs, but we have more crit OPs and more crits. In fact, we should have almost no white hits if we let it go for two ticks. This is the best configuration according to my calculations, because although you have fewer HOTAs, more of them are crits, and more of them are therefore also going to be crit overpowers. The other thing to note is that not only is Red Ring of Furor proccing more often if you let Whirlwind go for two ticks, Banished Lord Talisman does as well. You'll see just by looking at the first 4 or 5 HOTAs in the one-tick configuration, we don't get a crit OP until our 5th HOTA. We get one every 4 HOTAs after that. In the one-handed two-tick configuration, we get a crit OP on our 4th HOTA and every 3rd HOTA after that. So this is going to be significantly more damage. So I mentioned going for one-handers is going to give you 6% more damage. And then, on top of that, going for 2 ticks instead of 1, even though you have fewer HOTAs overall, that's another 6% damage. Strangely enough, if you look at a two-hander two-tick configuration, that's going to be 2 fewer HOTAs in a minute. And those are crits that are missing, not crit OPs. It's only a difference of like 0.5% of damage. And I think this might be something that would be normalized out if I continued this simulation for more than a minute. Maybe not. Anyway, I would say that maybe going from two-handed two-tick to one-handed two-tick, it's only going to be a small increase in DPS. It's going to cost you a skill point. Maybe it's not worth it. So I would advise two-handed two ticks. Do not get Furious Whirlwind. Use that point elsewhere. Or one-handed two-tick with Furious Whirlwind. I said one-handed two-tick. I should have said one-handed one-tick with Furious Whirlwind. And again, that's going to cost you a skill point, but it's going to give you a 6% damage boost. So that's the conclusion. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what your results are if you try this. And if you have any idea how to actually guarantee that you'll have 2 ticks, you might need to use a mouse macro with a certain delay or something. I don't know. Haven't done it myself. Spent too much time in Excel, as usual. All right. Happy New Year, everyone. Enjoy.